Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We're going to get started in just a minute to give folks time to join. We actually have people who registered for this event from 8 different countries, and within the United States from 20 different states. So we're super excited. Okay, great. See the participants joining. All right, so love to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Writing Beyond the Binary, creating bi, plus, and polyamorous storylines. My name is Christina Fiallo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and president of Rewrite the Byline. Rewrite the Byline works to create film, television, and media narratives that reshape cultural norms and drive policy change to advance health equity, economic opportunity, and civil rights for bi plus people and non-nuclear families. So before we begin, I want to thank my colleague, Rhiannon Ling. Rhiannon is joining us behind the scenes today mostly. Rhiannon is a brilliant bi theater maker, filmmaker, and storyteller who provides script consulting on plays and musicals here at Rewrite the Byline. And her work also revolves around gender, sexuality, and their intertwining with history, psychology, politics, and the arts. So she's going to be monitoring the Q&A throughout the event. So if you look below, there's a Q&A function. So you can drop any of your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We're going to answer some of them as we go and then save others for the end. So she'll be able to pose them to our amazing panelists here. So I want to start with a simple, but I think really powerful truth that all of us, I think, on this panel could agree with, is that stories shape what people believe is possible. And the problem that I see is that bi plus people and polyamorous people have often been written through a very narrow lens. Too frequently, bi plus characters are portrayed as confused, deceptive, hypersexual, tragic, or, were simply erased altogether. Research that I did with my colleague Erin Hammersley found that the vast majority of bi plus characters in film and television fall into 10 reoccurring patterns of misrepresentation. And at the same time, polyamorous and non-monogamous characters are often reduced to punchlines, cautionary tales, or plot devices. And we're going to talk about all of that today. But these portrayals really matter because the stigma bi plus people and polyamorous people face in the media directly impacts our health, our economic opportunity, our safety, and our ability to thrive. Bi plus people experience anxiety at higher rates than gay, lesbian, and straight people. We're paid less than gay, lesbian, and straight people. And nearly 1/3 cisgender bi plus women and trans people fall below the federal poverty threshold. So when audiences repeatedly see the same stereotypes, it's clear those stereotypes are shaping public attitudes. But on the flip side, when writers create nuanced, multi-dimensional characters, they expand what audiences can imagine and understand about people whose experiences may differ from their own. And I think we're living through a remarkable moment of possibility. More creators, like many of you who are on our panel today, and many of you that I think are in the audience, are questioning old assumptions about sexuality, relationships, family, and identity. And some of the most compelling characters on screen today are really the ones who are challenging binary thinking altogether. So today's conversation is not about creating, the perfect characters. It's about writing relationships that feel human, specific, and emotionally true. And I'm really grateful to all of you for joining us, and especially to our panelists for sharing their expertise and insights. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists as I pose them a question. So I want to start with you, Javier. Javier Rosenwasser is the co-creator of HBO Max's Felices Los Seis, known in English as Six is Not a Crowd, which is hands down, if anyone knows me on this call, hands down, this is my favorite bi plus and polyamorous show. Javier also was a co-writer of El Presidente, produced by Amazon Prime, and Tierra Incognita, a Disney Plus series, among others. So thank you so much for being here, Javier.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so Javier, most films and shows we watch assume monogamy as the default social structure. And then within that role world, you have bi plus characters, even if they even exist, who are most often portrayed as confused, indecisive, or incapable of commitment. What have you seen change when writers begin treating relationship structure as actually a world building choice rather than just a universal constant?
Well, I think that it's a little redundant, but a new world opens up. Um, um, I like the term non-monogamy because it states what it's not instead of saying what it is, and I think that it represents um, a lot more than just words because when you're thinking about what it's not and you're thinking that way in a story, I think you realize that you have a very, very wide and open possibility to write characters. And then you have the freedom to choose what that character is, not so much between the bounds of what it's supposed to be. And that's the same with non-monogamy, I guess. Traditional monogamy is not open to discuss a lot of things. If everything is written in stone, and when you start asking, but why should this be that way? Well, why should that be that way? Um, it's everything becomes more interesting. Many what ifs start to appear, and then that also gives you like something to chew on with characters and with stories. What if this was this way instead of that way? Um, and regarding characters, I guess that as writers, when we think about when we think outside this box, we are forced in a good way to think more deeply about multidimensional characters. Every screenwriter manual says, okay, uh, you have to try to write multidimensional characters, meaning that that they have to be more than what. Oh, well, this one is this person is shy or this person is romantic and that's it. I mean, there's more to it for each characters. So when you start to ask what if or thinking about the box outside the box of these relationship rules, inherently you are like forced to think about, well, this character is more than a person who is searching for a boyfriend or a girlfriend and that's it. I mean, I'm not saying that there are so many movies or romantic movies in this case. I'm talking about romantic rom-coms because Six is Not a Crowd is a rom-com. Uh, but I'm not saying that most rom-coms are just like that basic because they aren't. There are many great characters in traditional rom-coms, but in general, um, answering your question, I think that thinking about outside the box of monogamy forces you to think about more deeply about each character.
Mm.
And I think that most interesting characters in general are confused and have doubts, and uh, that brings more meat to the character. But in this case, it's not about the doubts or the confusion. It's not about their sexuality or their relationships structure, just about something else or lots of things that we as persons or humans have. Um, I don't know, we may stumble upon.
Oh, I really love that. And you bring up
I hope I
so
was clear. I'm sorry for my English. I don't know.
No,
Sorry.
that was so clear. Thank you. And I think it brings up some really good points, and they all point to what I love most about Six is Not a Crowd because Hollywood frequently asks queer characters of any sort, but particularly queer characters in diverse relationship structures to justify themselves to the audience. And Six is Not a Crowd really is a masterclass in writing bi plus characters and polyamorous characters who never have to defend their existence. So thank you for bringing us that show. Nicole, I want
Thank
to
you for
turn to
saying that.
you. Of course, yes, it's how I feel. Nicole, I want to turn to you because you spent years in Hollywood, both in front of and behind the camera. And for those of you who don't know Nicole, Nicole is an actor, singer, writer, and LGBTQ plus activist. She plays Rebecca Wilson on Criminal Minds Evolution and can be seen as Mystique in the upcoming Wolverine game for PlayStation 5. If you've ever watched Westworld, Call Me Kat, Anyone But Me, Good Trouble, or Blackish, you will know Nicole. She was also the polyamory consultant on season 2 of the L Word Generation Q, which I can't wait to dive into, Nicole. But to get us started, when you read a script that includes a polyamorous or otherwise diverse family or relationship structure, because you've played a lot of queer characters yourself, what immediately tells you that the writer understands these relationships? And on the flip side, what immediately tells you that they don't?
That's a very good question. I have been, I will say, like, certainly for the first half of my career, I was very blessed to have writers who were also queer, who were queer writers writing queer roles. And there is like there's a flip side to that where you're existing within a niche space and you only have queer writers writing queer things for queer people. And we're all going like, well, but who really needs to see this is the greater straight world. And over it's been nice though over like the 20 years that I've been in this business to see the tide turning on that and see more and more representation. But I can say that like what a couple things that like first of all, if the writers are immediately willing to kill off a bi character without any thought, I kind of want to be like, there's a history of this, and you want to be kind of sensitive to that. I mean, I'm not saying you got to keep all the bi characters alive. Like again, to what Javier was saying, like we want to be multidimensional people. We want multidimensional characters. We don't always want to have to be good or bad, or we don't want to have the rules bent for us. We just also don't want to always die. So it's
Mhm.
it's like it's
Please,
that.
yes, we got to stop that.
Yeah, and I would say it's the same for you know, painting them as a good guy or a bad guy? Are they making excuses for their sexuality? Are they victimized in some way, or are they just living their lives? Like that's another big part of it is I think depending on where you're telling the story too, that's another thing. Like, where is the story coming out of? Is it coming out of, New York City in America, or is it coming out of, Nigeria? Like we're talking, those are very different positions that queer people are in. But I can only speak for, myself. I feel like, okay, if we're writing characters who are like metropolitan American queer people at this point, what we don't need are more like sad sack kind of coming out stories where, everybody has to like adjust and it's the shame, whatever, So if I feel like if it's being written like that, I'm like, I don't know. I still feel like we're looking at queer people as their coming out stories and not as their whole selves existing in the world. So those are some like red flags for me. But when on the flip side, when I see that they're just living their lives, like I loved that in Criminal Minds when my Aisha Tyler's character, who plays my wife on the show, when she first started dating my character, it was a passing comment. Like it wasn't even that the character Paget Brewster's character who she was talking to was like, oh, a woman? It was just like, whoa, what's going on there? And she's like, yeah, and she's like, by the way, this isn't the first woman I've dated, but this is the first woman I feel this way about. And that is the most that was ever said about the queer thing. And I love that. I thought like, great, we're just existing in this world. And to me, that's always a big thing. Let us be people beyond just our sexual or relationship orientation. And I can't really speak to the polyamory of it because to my knowledge, I'm trying to like go through my Rolodex of roles right now. I've never been cast as a poly. this person, or had to kind of watch that other than things that I've been directly involved in on the writing side. So.
That's wonderful. Yeah, 100%. And I think the heart of what you're talking about is grounding screen portrayals in lived experience. And to keep us grounded in that, I want to turn to Zachary Zane. Zach, thank you for joining us. Zach is a Brooklyn-based sex columnist and author whose work centers on sexuality, culture, and the LGBTQ plus community. He's author of Boyslut, a memoir and manifesto. I'm sure many of us on this call have read it. And his sex and relationship columns and essays have appeared in pretty much everywhere: Men's Health, Cosmo, New York Times, Rolling Stone, Washington Post, GQ, Playboy, so much more. Zach, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. One thing that really strikes me about your work is that, I mean, your writing is so fun to read, and there's like a real depth in it, and you really challenge audience to distinguish between harm and discomfort. Can you share more about that distinction and about how writers might apply that distinction when creating stories about, polyamory or bisexuality?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think it's important to start like that depiction does not inherently mean endorsement. You know what I mean? And I think people confuse that, and I wish there was a little bit more literacy among viewers to make that distinction. We have Wolf of Wall Street, which is clearly making fun of these schmucks, these bros, and then there's an entire generation of young men who take this seriously and emulate these men and want to be these men. I don't actually think that's Scorsese's fault. I think he's allowed to be an artist and create art. But I bring this up to say, um, and kind of piggybacking off of Nicole, I want us to have messy, nuanced characters. But I want these, like, I don't believe that we just need to have positive depictions of bisexuality and polyamory consistently across the board. We do not. But the difference between what's going to make it harmful and discomfort is, are these, when it's a less than positive depiction, when it is depicting us as messy and complicated and making the mistakes, are those things that we actually do? Are those struggles that we have? And if so, then okay, let's share this. Like that is an honest depiction. When you have a not honest depiction and then you're depicting us negatively, no, I think that is problematic. And you'll see that a lot with sex worker like videos or movies. I mean, like sex worker just media and content. Like so
Mhm.
often it's like, oh, this is actually not the experience of a sex worker, and you're depicting them negatively and poorly. Um, and so I think there needs to be, oh yeah, like I want us to be messy. I want us to be complicated. To what Nicole said, I want us to just be treated the same way as everyone else is. And I think that distinction of, is this actually happening? Is this a real thing? And then also, it wouldn't hurt to balance it with something else. It doesn't always have to be this trauma porn. Everything is negative and blah, 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 because there is so much beauty to bisexuality and non-monogamy too. And I think we can find that balance. But I think as like generally, if this is a real depiction, an authentic depiction, it might not be mine. Like, yeah, that you might be uncomfortable by that, but question your things. I saw so many negative reviews of the invite, and I was kind of
Mhm.
shocked by people disliking it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and it was the people who I think saw depiction as endorsement. Versus, I'm sorry, the invite is a new movie that came out with Olivia Wilde, Seth Rogen, Edward Norton, and Penelope Cruz. And it's kind of based off afterwards. I'm like, is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? And it actually was based off of a modern retelling. But it's about these poly couple meeting this very unhappy monogamous couple in this kind of bottleneck episode or movie of them taking place in the department. Esther Perel was the like relationship poly consultant on it. It was absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, the poly people fucked up. They did things that a poly couple should know better than to do. Have I seen those mistakes made? But I kind of saw these negative reviews being like, oh, this isn't a positive depiction. I go, it's an accurate depiction. It's a beautiful, messy depiction. And that is okay. So, not to go against, others, like, but I think there is space and room for both as long as it's honest and authentic.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing. And it really resonates with me, that distinction, probably with most polyamorous people too, because, we live in a society that privileges monogamy. My colleague Megan Burke and I wrote an article for the LA Times last month that discussed how Western society has created, enforced, and normalized monogamy as really the only acceptable relationship structure. Monogamy is treated as the default setting for intimacy. And that preference for monogamy really lives in everything from health insurance policies and tax law to apartment leases and obviously like invitations that just offer a +1. And so I think, yeah, we want to see ourselves represented positively, but I think what you're speaking to is like, let's see something that's truly authentic. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Nicole, when the L word approached you, I'm so excited to talk about the L word because we briefly talked about it. Nicole was on a panel last year in the city of West Hollywood for Bi Visibility Week that Rewrite the Byline put on, co-sponsored by the city of West Hollywood. And we were able to talk for like a split second about this. So I'm really excited to dive into this with you now. So when the L word approached you to help create a polyamorous storyline, what were some of the mistakes you warned them against making so as not to reinforce that, what I'm talking about, like this presumption against polyamory?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Also, I'm sorry, my robot vacuum just decided to start
Love
out
it.
of nowhere.
That's how webinars are.
Okay, I'm hoping that it's not too distracting, but if you see it or hear it, that's what it is. Anyway, so when I was approached actually by Marja Lewis Ryan, the showrunner, because we knew each other from NYU. We went to school together. And she knew just because I'd been sharing, via social media for some time, that I was polyamorous and that I actively was in multiple relationships. And so essentially I'd been living this way and had been quite out about it and whatever. And when she approached me about, would you want to consult on season 2, I said, sure, but like, do you want a professional? I'm not, I would not call myself a professional, relationship coach or like anywhere near like an Esther Perel or anything like that. Are you sure you don't want somebody like that? And she said, no, actually, it is precisely because you are just a person living this that we want to talk to you. So I think they didn't want to be too jargony about it. They didn't want to have to overthink it, which I also can understand. There is a lot of jargon and there are many, many, many possibilities, obviously, for how poly or non-monogamy can look, to Javier's point. So I went into that conversation with them when I did the Zoom. It was during the pandemic and whatever. When I did the Zoom with the showrunner and with Leisha Haley and several cast members and the creator of the show and everything, and said, I want to be really clear off the bat. Like this is something I feel like I don't want you guys to step into. Is what I'm about to share is my own experience of polyamory. And there are so many ways that this can look that what I don't want is to have just my experience become representative of the experience of polyamory or the right way to do it or whatever. This is one perspective, take it or leave it, essentially. And I like that they seemed to really understand and respect that. And so, yeah, I mean, that was the big thing for me. There was also a difference for me in that, like, my experience, at least at that time, was one where it was with a cis man and a cis lesbian. And I was like, well, I doubt the L word is going to go that way, but might, with Alice having been bisexual, at least in the original version. So, the dynamics were different, but in any case, my big thing was like, please see this as one option. And I actually encouraged them to do more research into other structures, other than the one that I personally had experience with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for bringing us that storyline in the L word. I think what I really appreciated also about the L word reboot is the character of Alice, who, like you mentioned, was always bi, but I think in the reboot in Generation Q, she was allowed to be bi. She also wasn't the character who really ultimately identified, okay, spoiler alert, but she wasn't really the character who really identified with polyamory in the end, which I found to be so important because while we're talking about bi plus and polyamorous storylines today, many bi plus people are monogamous, and that's important to validate and celebrate on screen too. On that note, Nicole, I do have a follow-up question because as script consultants, we're invited into the conversation, but we're not the ones making the final call. So when you think about the gap between maybe some of the suggestions you've made as a consultant or even like playing a part, and then the stories that ultimately reach audiences, is there, a representation choice or an emotional truth you wish had survived, that journey to the screen?
It's hard to say because I actually do think that the choice for Alice to ultimately be like, you know what, actually, I'm monogamous and that is what works for me, is representative of its own experience and a very valid and important one. So I like that without trashing the idea of polyamory. I think this actually kind of goes back to, it's particularly in that show, like, I just wish we had more storylines because it's hard when you have an entire show and a canon that, between the first season and the second, or the first iteration and the second went like, what, 9 seasons, I want to say, I think it was altogether. And you have one polyamorous storyline and it ends in like betrayal and then turning back to monogamy. It feels like, really, that's what we decided to do with the poly storyline. And like I had nothing to do with that, like I didn't know what they were going to write based on just me trying to present my own experience and my relationship, which at that point was actually going quite well, and did not resembled in some ways what we saw, but not in a whole lot of other ways. And I guess that's kind of my feeling is like, I don't know, like I don't believe that we need to show that we have a responsibility, or whoever writes poly has a responsibility to show, oh, it always works and it's great and everybody's super ethical. And like, I don't actually believe that at all. But I do think that if you are the writer of a show, of a canon of 9 seasons, and you decide of your own volition to put a poly storyline in there, and you're going to sabotage it and show betrayal and return to monogamy, I guess I wonder, why did you put it in there? What was the point? Really? What did we gain? What did anybody gain from this? And that it has less to do with even them personally and more to do with like the lack of representation of poly in general, because we don't have to worry about these things so much if we have more representation. But still, I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it shows where it annoyed me. So there you go.
No, it really does. And I think you're speaking to the fact that, like, yeah, there was like one poly storyline, there was one bi character. And that's the problem is that if you only have one bi character, one polyamorous storyline, if at all, right? But if you only have one, then that feels like it has to like hold so much more weight than if we're living in a kind of a world like Six is Not a Crowd, where actually like most people are polyamorous and you're living in their world, and most people are bi and you're living in their world, which again, I'm gonna just keep plugging for the rest of my life. Six is Not a Crowd. I hope to see more things like this. But it makes me think of this show that I recently watched. It's a Colombian show called The Guest in English, and there were actually 3 bi characters. One was definitely a murderer, and I won't give it too much else away, but there were 2 really good bi characters, and I was like, okay, like I can sit with that. I can have the murderous bisexual, which is definitely a trope, but we can also see that like we can be good too. So I liked that diversity of characters. So Javier, I want to turn back to you because I think we need your wisdom here, because one of the challenges of writing polyamorous characters is that many traditional television story engines are built around scarcity. We have love triangles, which you kind of spoke about with like, the modern romance kind of rom-com. You have secret affairs, you have forbidden attraction. But when you were creating Six is Not a Crowd, how did you think about generating the conflict to kind of like move the story along without falling back on, those monogamous assumptions or those tropes?
Well, I think first of all, as Nicole and Zach said before, it's always nice to see messy characters, but that mess does not necessarily have to do with the traditional conflicts of cheating or whatever monogamous people has as a mess in their relationships or their lives. Um, and what I find when I'm writing in general is that when I stop and said, what do I do with this com barrier maybe, and like referring to your question, I'm sorry. Okay, cheating is not a problem. A third person is not a problem. Basically, in romantic comedies, there's not much more things where you can play around. And I think when you find that those kind of problem when you're writing, it's a chance for you to say, okay, maybe this problem is actually my solution, in a sense that those monogamous assumptions are or the fact that the conflict is not that. It's what's funny, in particular in this comedy, because there's not a conflict, but there's supposed to be one. I mean, uh, the character Damian says, so you're saying that if I tell the other person that I'm with you, it's everything's okay. Um, and that it's like kind of mind blowing for most people who's watching the show, and for the character in this sense. Um, I think that contrary to what you said before, Christina, and your article, where most of the time the punchline is by characters or poly characters, this time monogamy is kind of the punchline. We always try to keep it with the most respect as possible, but it is the punchline in a sense that we are saying, okay, let's laugh a little bit about those rules, and why does it always has to be a conflict around falling in love with someone else, or cheating, or all the grays that the gray areas that are between cheating and not cheating, because monogamy is so funny in a sense that, okay, I was with another person. Did you kiss? No, but we talked very close to each other, and is that cheating, or is not that cheating? And I know everything is an opportunity for comedy. I love writing comedy, and when you get observational about all these things in relationships, especially monogamy, which is what most of us learned in our socially and in the screens. But like you said, what we see on screens is what we learn. So I think in a way. These problems are actually kind of a solution that we find for, I mean, to get more ideas and interesting stuff to work on.
I love that. So, like, really kind of taking that, what may present as a problem in kind of a traditional rom-com, and using that as the solution, and that comedic relief. I love that. I remember a scene in Six is Not a Crowd where Caro, who's the main character, she's poly and bi, and she knocks on the door of her boyfriend, and he's with his ex-girlfriend, and he's like so stressed about it because he's like comes from like the world of monogamy, and she's like what's going on, like totally like fine about it. And that creates like a lot of, it's like pointing out kind of these unwritten rules that society follows, and kind of having fun with it. So you did a brilliant job with that. Thank you. I'm really grateful that I get to help a lot of writers with their scripts. Rhiannon, who is taking your questions in the Q&A. So if you haven't put any questions in, please feel free to do that. We're gonna turn to questions from the audience soon. But I'm really grateful. I know Rhiannon is too, to work with a lot of writers with their scripts. And when I read scripts that include polyamory or non-monogamy, one of the most common shortcomings I encounter is that writers mistake kind of those provocative aspects of these relationships for actually character development. So the relationship structure is there, but the emotional journey of the character isn't. And I'd love to hear what you think about this, Zach, because you've written extensively about ethical non-monogamy as something, far more complex than simply, quote, opening a relationship. I'd love to hear, what emotional realities, forms of growth, or moments of vulnerability do you think popular media most often fails to capture?
Yeah, I mean, most of it they failed to capture. I
Yeah.
think that's why we're having this talk for sure. When I pitched I had a column at Cosmo called Navigating Non-Monogamy for a while. And when I pitched it to them, I had access to their back end to see how well a piece does traffic wise. And I go, your poly content's doing very well. You've written two pieces in about 50 different ways. All you've written is how to open up your relationship and how to navigate jealousy, and you've figured out different headlights to write that. I've been open or non-monogamous poly, various forms of it for like a dozen years now. If I get jealous, I talk about it and don't project my insecurities. I'm not opening up my relationship because I've been doing this forever. There are about 10 million other things that I struggle with that I don't see depicted, and I would just like to see those nuances depicted within non-monogamy and polyamory. And that was a monthly column. Each month, I would do a different thing that was like really non-monogamy or poly, like 301, I would say. Um, and I would just love to start seeing those on a big screen. I would love to see a story about a big poly couple that's been completely fine for 20 years, and they now have a kid who's 8 years old, and how do they navigate being in the straight world with that kid? I haven't seen that story. That would be great. I wrote a piece about being like, poly people stop fucking de-escalating. And I know it's because you hold yourself to a higher standard and you're so afraid of people being like, look, this relationship failed. Polyamory always failed. So you feel this compulsion that you have to be friends. Go no contact for 6 months. And if you're going to be friends later. I've seen how, ironically, a lot of poly people, especially in the sex positive community, are actually the people who STI shame the most. And that is because, again, they are overcorrecting this fear of, oh my God, I'm spreading diseases. I can't do that. It's this. It's like your condoms, you're honest about it. It's also sexual autonomy. If you're honest about your exposure and you don't want to wear condoms, then don't fucking wear condoms. Like that is your God-given choice. Like it doesn't fucking matter. But I've seen that overcorrection where I'm kind of surprised in poly-sex positive spaces how if someone who wore I still get fucking gonorrhea from blowjobs, and I'm never going to wear a fucking condom while giving head or while received. Like I'd rather die than do that. That's okay. That's the choice I can make. But I see, yeah, poly people doing that. I would love something about cohabitating while poly, where it's five people in this in a way that I lived with my boyfriend, my boyfriend's wife, my boyfriend's wife's girlfriend, and none of it, the drama that you think would be the drama was not the drama. Um, I would love to see something about and anyone, you guys, these are all free ideas. Take them. If you're aspiring writers, write the script. I don't have the time, so do it. What about a series that looks at the queer younger millennials who are non-monogamous ethically and really over enthusiastic consent forward in that way, or enthusiastic consent forward, and a generational thing about swingers in their 60s who actually don't share the same morals or the same values despite being part of the same larger non-monogamous community. There's just hold on, I made some notes of other stuff. I can't read my notes, so that's great. That's helpful, Zach. But I think just to say, like, there's just so much more to be done. And listening to Javier, what I love about Javier, like, kind of the question you asked him was essentially just like, how are you a good writer? You're just not like, and that's Javier's just not doing the same boring shit. He's thinking more thing like this other shit. It's lazy fucking writing. It is boring fucking writing. You're doing stuff that has not been seen. I would just like to see shit that has not been seen. Again, I want it to be accurate. I want it to be authentic. I want it to be genuine. And I don't think we need to. Also, it's like 2026, and maybe I'm a little biased because I know I'm in my Brooklyn bubble that's like extremely poly. But it's like there's been plenty of poly visibility in mainstream mags over the past 10 years. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. So when I see these like new shows where someone says they're non-monogamous and the other person's jaw drops and they go nuts and they're like a liberal Jew living in LA, it's like, sorry, I'm a liberal Jew. That's why I said Jewish. But yeah, but like, they know that exists. Maybe if they're explaining that to a conservative couple in the South who is so not online, okay, they might have the jaw on the floor. But like, if you're a decently read person who reads media in 2026, who's decently like, you know that this exists. You're not going to be shocked by it. You don't have to have that scandal factor anymore. But hopefully I answered the question. I just think there's just so much more to be done that just hasn't been. And I would love to see it. That's the
I
truth.
would too. I love all these ideas. I hope people write them. This is great. Yeah, thank you so much, Zach. I also think what you spoke to around the fact that there were only like two types of stories that were being told. And one of them was jealousy. And that's like always the question you get, right? Like, it's like, how do you deal with jealousy? I'm like, everybody deals with jealousy. Like there's so many responses to that. And even within that, I feel like we only get told like one story.
Yeah.
So yeah, more diversity in stories. I'm gonna ask Rhiannon to come on screen and she's going to ask some of your questions to our panel.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you guys for such a lovely panel so far. It's been wonderful to listen to all of your insights and poignancies. And our audience has some questions for you. I'm just going to go straight down, y'all, how they were sent in, the order in which they were sent in. So the first one we have, for anyone who would like to answer, from Adriana. I've really appreciated everyone's insights. They've been incredibly valuable. The discussion about less than positive depictions especially resonated with me. I'm currently writing a screenplay that critiques unicorn hunting dynamics, and I'm working hard to make sure I'm criticizing the specific dynamic, particularly the way thirds can be treated as fetishized people without agency, rather than unintentionally criticizing polyamory itself. Do you have any advice on walking that line effectively?
Yeah, I do. Sorry, I'm going to take this one. I think
Go for
as
it.
someone, I think you need to have the person juxtaposed with the person who likes to be the third. So generally you are showing the people, let's say on Tinder or Field, who are completely fetishizing this third, objectifying the third. I think to have the person who is like, I actually want to be your third. I still want to be treated with respect. That doesn't mean you can treat me like shit. It doesn't mean you can kick me out immediately afterwards. But as someone, I love being the third, love being a unicorn hunted. That is great. So I think as long as you can absolutely show the problematic nature of unicorn hunters, but then also showing the people who are like, I kind of like the fact that I'm the third. That makes it easy. I like kind of being the guest star. I like being slightly objectified in this way, and I'm taking autonomy and have it. So I think as long as you have the balance of it, even though it's not the focal point of it, the focal point is going to be the unethicalness of the unicorn hunters and the way that the way that most women, again, for male and men it's different, but like women do not like that. But I think if you do have a woman in a small role in a small scene who does like it and explains why she does like it, that kind of allows you to not depict polyamory in this one way, or to be like threesomes are bad or non-hierarchical poly is bad. Like, no, I think you just need that little bit of a comparison in some small aspect.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that. The concept of contrast and juxtaposition, I think, is so important to script development in general. So love hearing it in terms of these specifics. We have one from Mel here, which I think is directed more towards Nicole, but anyone can answer. How can we become a consultant for shows and scripts? I'm a relationship coach and I also have experience as an actor, and I'd love to help put out more stories out there that show solo polyamory and relationship anarchy.
So, great question, and I'm sorry that my answer is going to be frustrating ahead of time. It's like anything else in Hollywood, it's relationships. So, you're going to want to make relationships, try to seek out relationships with creators who are producers, showrunners, writers who are working on these kinds of stories, who have worked on these kinds of shows. like I said, I became a consultant simply because I knew the showrunner from college. But I guess I shouldn't say simply, because I was also out there with my own personal life and my own personal experience and sharing that with the world. And not in a way where it was like my entire personality, but just in a way where it was like, oh, this person is identifiable as a polyamorous person. They are living their life. They're doing the thing. These are their partners. I know their names now. I know, like without overexposure, but you know what I mean? Like living your life, doing the things, and then you know, making inroads with the people you want to work with. It's kind of like anything else, like who do you want to work with? Who do you think are awesome? What rooms would you want to get into? Okay, how do you create those relationships? Are there networking events? Do you have mutual friends with those people? Do they do panels that you could attend? Like networking 101. I know that's such a boring answer, but there you go.
It's a very real answer, though. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, we have one from Charmé. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. It's beautiful. We have a question here for Javier. Huge fan of the show. I've never seen poly people making love. It was so beautiful to see. I'm curious if Damien was queer. By the end of the show, there is this gray area. Could you clarify if he's bi? Do you want to talk about it a little bit? I'll hand it over to you.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much. Makes me so happy to see fans around the world. Wow. Thanks. Wow, that's a question that would make Damian a little uncomfortable, I guess, because I guess at this stage he's hetero-curious. Is it the right term in English? I think he's curious. He's very curious, depending on the day. There's another character who's clearly bi, who is Tito, who falls in love with Gonzalo, another character. I think he is very curious along the whole season, and in a very macho and manly surrounding that he grew up with his friends. I don't think he would right now consider himself to be bi, but I'm sure he would with no problem say that he's curious and maybe queer, because he ends up in a poly relationship with Carolina, and but I don't know. I'm not 100% sure about what I'm saying about the character, but I guess he would identify more as a hetero curious, I guess.
Oh, I love that. I think that's a great answer.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience, Rhiannon. But I also just want to say I love how you said this question would make Damien very uncomfortable, because that is totally his character. Like, so good.
Thanks.
Oh my goodness. I'll jump to another question, but I do just want to share this comment here because it was really sweet. I particularly like the comments on polyam families with kids. I think so much media fixates on the sex part of polyam and forgets that we're actually real, somewhat boring people just living our lives, and that for a lot of people, kids are part of that. I keep trying to write this story and can't get it nailed down. So hey, maybe we'll have a script coming out soon.
Start with your own experience. That's all I'm going to say. I know we don't have time for this, but I saw that and I agree. I am a polyamorous bisexual person with a family, with a 5-year-old kid, and it is its whole own thing. Start from your own experience and expand out. And if I may, insert comedy in there, because there's so much comedy. Like thinking about even just being a parent and trying to deal with other parents is comedy in and of itself. And then you add the poly element and it is, room for a lot of laughs. That's what I would say.
Incredible. One more question here. So we often talk about representation in terms of visibility, but visibility alone doesn't necessarily create understanding. So we kind of talked about this, but I'd love to hear, since Zach named a couple of his stories for for the taking. I would especially love to hear from Javier and Nicole as well. What is one story about polyamory that you wish existed in television, film, literature, or I'll throw in theater as a New Yorker that still hasn't been told?
Me? Okay. Since the kid thing was already just brought up, because I agree with that. Cohabitation. Like, I really think that cohabitation is something that I would love to see. And I'm saying this as like a consumer of media and a person who is constantly going, how can this work? How do I create my intentional living situation? You know, my AKA commune. Like, how do all of those dynamics actually function? Who sleeps where when? You know, like what, how do we share responsibilities within a house? How do we keep it from also only just becoming roommates, which could totally happen. It happens with monogamy, you know, like cohabitation is so rich with questions and with humor and also with sadness. And it's just, I would love to see more poly cohabitation storylines.
Nicole, I'm going to add also, just I remember living with my boyfriend, wife, or like also the cooking dynamic because every one's vegan, one's gluten free. No one wants to fucking eat anything that I cook. And I'm like, yeah, you cook your own fucking meal. Like, I'm doing my best here. I finally like bullied my boyfriend. I'm like, you have to eat eggs and fish. Otherwise I'm not cooking. Otherwise I can't do shit. And like, I think there's so much, yeah, the navigating who sleeps where. I ran into the issue of when I broke up with him, I'm like, I just feel like roommates. Because we kind of fell out of love because we got too comfortable with each other, and then we're expressing that sexual desire elsewhere. And Esther Perel talks about kind of reinvigorating it here, but I was seeking it elsewhere, and we broke up crying. I'm like, I don't feel this anymore, and now it's on me for not going back and reinvesting in my primary relationship. But I think there's just adding to what you said. I think there's so much richness in this that I think could be so cool.
I think if I have to think fast about an answer, maybe a term that Zach used a couple of minutes ago, which is de-escalation, because I don't know, it's I think that the poly couple breaking up has much more layers than just a regular, I'm sorry for the term, monogamous couple. Just break up and you have two options. I mean, not talk anymore or talk anymore. But there may be much more factors implicated in a breakup, and also it's like if there was like a different freedom compared to monogamy, when the couple was standing, and then when you're breaking up, it probably is going to be different as well. So I think we would have to be careful about not falling into the problems that we just talked about, about okay, poly couple breaks up, many couples break up. Well, I'm saying poly couple, but polycule or poly whatever, throuple or whatever. But everyone can break up or not break up. But I think it's a dash of originality if you're talking about another with the necessary care. Tell a story about a poly relationship breaking up.
I know we're out of time. I just want to add one more thing. Sorry. Because something you said that made me think. Another thing that I would like to see is mixed dynamics of people in polycules, of people who are queer and people who do not identify as queer. Because that is, seeing from personal hinge experience, a real thing. And it is really hard to navigate those dynamics within a relationship too. So there you go.
So good. I don't no straight people want to date me. I think that's what it is too. So I've never even like run into this issue, you know what I mean? But it would have been something I never thought about. I think I've only dated bi people since I've come, or bi or gay men. But I think it's in part straight women get nervous dating a bi, whatever it is. But something I would never even thought of, Nicole. I love that.
I love all this. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Rhiannon. I don't know if we have like time for this last question, so maybe we can do this in rapid fire. But I'd love to hear from the three of you as a final question. To kind of imagine that, because this is going to be recorded, so people can watch this later. So imagine you have somebody watching this later or now who wants to include either a bi character or a polyamorous character in their next project, or both. What's like the single most important thing you hope they remember when they sit down at the keyboard? And I can kind of start off with this because I've been thinking about this a lot. There's a lot of great shows with pretty strong bi plus representation, yet they still choose to avoid using the term bisexual, which in and of itself is like, I wish we could just say bi, pan. Like let's say these words. Not everyone needs to identify that way in the real world, but on screen we need to see that representation through verbal cues. But what's worse is that instead of saying bi or pan, the bi character refers to themselves as, quote, being attracted to both. We hear this so often, and I'm always like, okay, both what? You know, this language assumes there are only two genders, you know, so at best it inaccurately defines bi plus identities, and at worst it's transphobic because we know that bi plus people are attracted to more than one gender or to people regardless of gender, not to like both. So I'd really love to see that language eradicated in Hollywood. So each of you maybe start off with you, Nicole. What would you want to have, you know, writers, the number one thing you want a writer to be thinking about when they sit down to write a bi plus or poly character?
Bi plus or poly character, I think I really just have to kind of echo what has been a theme in this and that Javier brought up first, which is just variety. Like, please just start with great writing great character. Who are great characters, and like allow that to lead everything. That there is like not one way that any of us act or are or whatever, but allow variety and really like in doing research, do your due diligence of looking up a whole lot of ways that non-monogamy and bisexuality look in the world. Yeah.
Beautiful. Maybe Zach?
Sure. Yeah, adding to that, like, just don't be basic. You know what I mean? Like, do something different, unique. And one thing that's helped me, I realize you are not special. And this is the best thing I learned about myself being a writer, in that if I'm struggling with something, specifically bisexuality, polyamory, and I am not seeing it written about, I'm not seeing it represented, that doesn't mean that you are alone. That doesn't mean that you're the only person doing this. It actually means there is a void in media, in literature, and whatever it is, and you are the person to fill that void. That's how I became the bisexual writer I was. I thought I was the only guy that all of a sudden I started writing about, and everyone reached out. So the fact that you are not special, that your experiences are actually, so in certain ways you are special. Yes, we're all special, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? But like, I think if you see a void, if you're experiencing something and you're writing about the self, or it's autofic, whatever it is, and you're not seeing it written about, that is what you should do. Because yeah, you're not alone, and other people will really resonate with your story.
Beautiful. Javier?
Well, I think it's kind of a follow-up from what Zach said. For someone who identifies as poly or bi plus, just right to don't be afraid to tell the story, because there's someone out there who will really appreciate and and feel the love that you're putting into your script when somewhere else in the world. And if it's someone who does not identify as poly or bi plus, talking specifically about non-monogamy, because it's what I had the opportunity to research a lot for this series. To do that, to seize the opportunity to read, to listen to podcasts, to read, because it's so interesting. Even if you don't identify if you identify as monogamous, because there's so many concepts that you can apply to your personal life, even if you don't ever plan to try or think about anything different. because it may open your mind in ways that you'll be grateful in the future.
I love that. I want to see ourselves reflected on screen beautifully and kind of reflect back to us kind of that world we want to live in too. So thank you all so much for joining us. I hope today's discussion has left you with some practical tools, maybe a new perspective, definitely renewed inspiration for the work ahead. And in this last minute, I want to thank the Polyamory Foundation for their generous support for this webinar, and invite you all, for those who are in Los Angeles, or if you want to come out to Los Angeles, we're holding an in-person event called the Write Us In Summit on September 19th in West Hollywood. I'll email you all. I think I have everyone's email addresses, the details. And please know Rhiannon, my colleague Erin, and I, and everyone here on this panel are available to support you. So, no, you don't have to go it alone. And please reach out to us at rewritethebyline.org. Thank you all. Have a wonderful.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for
Thanks a lot.
tuning in, everyone.
Yeah, this is
Thank you,
awesome.
Christina. Thank you
This
for
is
putting this together.
awesome. Yeah, it's so wonderful. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.